Hey everyone, this is episode 4 of my Patching with Purpose mini-series. What this series is all about is going into the Sound Studio or modular system with an idea in mind. We use the elements and principles of music to kind of come up with an idea and also draw upon some influences and go into patching with a game plan. If you haven't watched the previous videos, at least go check out the first one because in that one I kind of explain the whole framework. Patch today is all about harmony. So what I wanted to do was try to use the Sound Studio in some unconventional or maybe just ways that I don't regularly use it. Oftentimes I find myself setting it up so the DFAM's holding down the rhythm, the mother is playing some sort of melody, and the Subharmonicon is playing the rhythm chords or the harmony section. So today I'm going to try and break away from that a little bit and we'll come up with something totally new, and we'll use some patching methods that I think are a little bit unconventional. As I said in the first video, the principles of music of tonality, texture, and timbre, that's kind of what we're going to start with and come up with an overarching idea. So what I want to create here is more an atmospheric drone type pad. For tonality, I want it to be dark and omnipresent, almost like it would be for like a horror movie or like a dark futuristic sci-fi movie or something like that. For texture and timbre, I want it to be really dense and have a gritty, rough, unrefined quality to it. So those are the principles that we're going to use to define all of our other choices and make this patch. As I've done in previous videos, I think it's important to talk about influences and also do some deep listening of other artists, kind of generate some ideas. So what I wanted to highlight today was the 2020 album Illusions of Time by Daniel Avery and Alessandro Cortini. I don't know a huge amount about these artists, but I'm pretty sure that they're using modular systems to create these albums, and I think it goes really well with what I'm trying to do here. This album has a kind of ambient soundscape type thing, but there are these hidden melodies and wonderful harmonies. It's just a really beautiful sounding album. The song that stuck out to me for this patch was called Inside the Ruins from that album. I was listening to that whole album, and when I got to that one song, I was like, yes, okay, this is the kind of thing that I have to work towards when I make the Harmony Patching with Purpose episode. So take some time, Illusions of Time by Daniel Avery and Alessandro Cortini. Listen to the Inside the Ruins track and you'll kind of see where I started with this idea. But there's another artist who I think I really want to highlight here, and that's John Coltrane. Now, of course, he's not a modular artist, but his album, A Love Supreme, is one of my favorite albums. I just think it's absolutely amazing, and it's what turned me on to his music. Oftentimes when he solos, he uses this method that involves pairing triads together. So he'll do these long runs where he's alternating between two different triads and kind of going through the inversions as he goes up and down scales. And he, of course, isn't playing slow swinging eighth notes like Miles Davis. He's doing this like cacophonous, like really fast 16th note runs. And the way it hits me is it creates this overall texture, this overall harmony. So you're not necessarily listening to the individual notes that he's playing, but it's just this kind of slurred together long string of notes that implies a particular mode or scale that he's going for. So with those two ideas in mind, I thought it would be great to kind of incorporate that into what we're doing, cram it all together, and we'll get some sort of hybrid Illusions of Time, A Love Supreme kind of vibe with the dark, omnipresent, sci-fi, horror show, drone kind of thing, and make a really unconventional and cool patch. Also, if you haven't seen my drone videos, where I talk about Lamont Young and I make a drone with each of the Sound Studio synths, definitely go check out that. We're gonna use some of those techniques here. I'm gonna be putting this patch and many others on my Patreon page. If you like this video and you wanna support my channel and me, I would really appreciate it if you went and checked out my Patreon page, signed up, send me a quick note saying hi and check out my patches over there. Either way, whether you sign up to Patreon or not, make sure you like and subscribe so you get notified of the next video I put out. And with all that talking stuff out of the way, let's head over to the Sound Studio and make some music. Okay, so we're gonna get started with the DFAM. We're gonna set the DFAM up to be in a drone mode. Now, one of the ways that this is gonna be unconventional from what I typically do is we're not gonna sync any of the synths together. So we don't have to worry about doing an assign output to the advanced clock. It's gonna be running separately. So I'm gonna kind of go through these settings pretty quickly because otherwise this is gonna be a super long video. So I'm gonna set up the voice. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments section. But the first thing we're gonna do is tune our oscillators. All of our envelopes, the one for the filter and both of the envelopes for the VCOs are going to be turned off. So they're not really gonna matter much. You can just set the VCO decay down because it doesn't matter if the envelopes are set to noon. I rarely actually tune the DFAM. Usually I just approximate things. Since this is going to be a drone and the tones really matter, I want to make sure that it's ringing out the exact notes that I want. So I'm going to use a tuner to do that. I'm going to use my Mordax data, but you could really use anything. In fact, most DAWs have a plugin that you could use. Actually, before I got my data, I would just use a free phone app, like a guitar tuner or something. And we'll start out with just the first VCO. So as I said in the intro, we're going to be working in C Dorian. So the bass chord for that is a C minor chord. So what I'm going to set this up as is to have this be droning with a C minor, with a minor third. So VCO1 is going to be a very low C, C2, and VCO2 is going to be E flat. And we'll go E flat 3 just to give some space. Let's tune VCO1. And it's really hard to get it perfectly, but that's pretty close. That's C2. Now I'm going to turn this down and turn up VCO2, and we're going to tune that. Make sure your FM amount's all the way down. We're going to tune that to E flat 3. There we go. Now if we hear them both together, wow, that's huge. Now, what I'm going to do to make this drone is turn the tempo almost all the way up, and then we can play with our velocities to create some kind of interesting sort of artifacts or movement, almost like pulse width kind of things. So let's listen. And that's where I'll start. Now there's going to be some cool things that are happening with the FM modulation and the syncing, and once we get into patching, it's going to be a lot more expressive. But I just want to give you a quick sense of what it sounds like when we mess with these things. So there's a lot of that dark, gritty texture. Now I also want to highlight that with the resonance, giving a little boost wherever the cutoff is, that gives us another tone that we can play with. Nice. All right, so that's great. We're going to add some modulation to this. We are going to, in fact, be modulating the cutoff, so we don't have to dial in that note too detailed per se, because it's going to play in later. All right, so with that kind of set up right now, let's head down to the mother and program in a voice there and get our sequence in so you can hear what I'm talking about with the John Coltrane reference. We'll do the Subharmonicon, then we'll patch everything together because that's where the fun really starts. Okay, so I've got a pretty basic voice programmed in just for something for us to work with. Okay, so let's talk about this whole paired triads idea. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to pick two triads that are in the Dorian mode, and we're going to play them in ascending with ascending note values and different inversions going all the way up. So I'm going to pick two triads that don't share any notes to really emphasize the Dorian mode. So we're going to use the C minor triad because that's kind of the bass triad. And then I'm also going to choose a D minor triad because it contains the note A, which in my mind is really what makes the Dorian mode the Dorian mode. That A is what makes it different from just a plain old C minor. We want to make sure to include that, and those two triads don't share any notes. So let me clear the sequence so we can start from scratch. I'm going to go into record mode. And when I'm doing specific sequences like this, I have it written out in front of me. And I think it's just easier to do it in step mode because you can program it exactly. If I was making something up on the fly, I would use it in keyboard mode. Actually, I might have the names of those two modes wrong. Either way, if you press shift and step, that's the mode I like to use. So this is going to be a 24-step sequence. The reason I chose 24 steps is because then we can go up through the triads and they each have equal amounts. So we'll set the end at, we'll go to the 24th step, set the end right there. And now we have a 24-step sequence. Let's go back to page 1 and start entering in our notes. So we're going to start at the 4th octave, C. And now the first 3 notes are going to be my C minor triad. So now I've got a C minor triad. And at this point, I'm going to jump to a D minor triad, starting just 1 note up from our original note. So we'll go to the 4th step, and I'm going to choose D4. So now you have a C minor triad and a D minor triad. And we're just going to keep going back and forth, but with a slightly higher inversion. So the next C minor triad that we do, rather than starting on C, we're going to start on E flat. Now I have to go to the next page, and we'll go to the first one. This is where it really helps to have it written down first. And we'll go up to the next octave and put it in C. Now we're going to go back to our D minor triad right here, but this time we're going to start on the F, on the 3rd. So we have to go back to the 4th octave, F, A, D. And again, we're just going to keep alternating. I'm going to go back to the C minor and start on G, and then back to the D. So I'm just going to blast through and enter in the rest of the notes on the sequencer so you can hear what it sounds like. There we go. So let me play it through from the beginning. Pretty cool stuff. And if we turn it up really fast, not all the way, but somewhere around 3 o'clock. It starts to all blend together and kind of give that Dorian feel to it. What I'm also going to do, just because I want to try and use some features that I don't typically use in patches, is we're going to set the playback to not only just go up, but we want it to be a pendulum because it's going to sound like it's running up and down. So I'm going to hold keyboard and step and we'll press 3. So now it's going to go up and down. Nice. All right, let's hear it with the DFAM droning on. Cool. All right, well, we're getting there. There's two more things I want to do to this voice. Number one, the mod polarity. So what this is doing, it's typically, I almost 99% of the time do it in positive polarity. And when it's set to envelope, what that's doing is at the beginning of each note, when the attack phase hits, it sends the cutoff up a little bit, giving it that. Now, if I turn it down, it goes in reverse. Now, you can't hear it very much because the cutoff is set really low. So if we're hitting it lower every single time I hit a note, it goes to the point where it's inaudible. But if I turn the cutoff up higher, you can start to hear it. And if the decay is slower, you can hear that it goes all the way down and then comes up, you know, whatever your decay rate is. So we're going to use that here. I'm going to set this a little bit lower, but listen to what it sounds like. I think it's really cool. It has that retro sci-fi kind of vibe to it. The last bit is the mod destination for the LFO. Typically, I leave this on pulse width. Using it on frequency, it's hard to find uses for it because if this is up pretty high, then it kind of makes the frequency go all over the place. And I don't really like that, but if you turn it down low and just barely up at all, I'm going to go about halfway between the first and second hash mark. I think it creates this really nice detuned flavor, especially if the LFO is set to a relatively low rate. Now, it's kind of hard to tell because when it's playing by itself, it doesn't adjust so much that you can really notice it. But if you play it against something, then you can start to hear how it sounds dissonant and then comes back in and then gets more dissonant again. So we're going to leave that in there as a part of our voice as well. All right, so that's the mother. We'll get back to the patching because I really think the patching is what makes this whole thing come together. But before we do that, let's set up our Subharmonicon voice and the sequences down there. So the first step when setting up the Subharmonicon, I recommend this for all of my patches, is we're going to tune our oscillators, and we're going to do that using a tuner. So what I do is I turn down all of the volumes of all the sub oscillators and the other oscillator and just have one voice. You make sure that the sequence assign is off. And right now I can see that this is ringing out at C4, which is exactly where I want it. So VCO1 is C, VCO2 is going to be C5. So we have C4 and C5. Now let's tune our sub oscillators. I want sub 1 to be hitting that really super low note. Oh, that's deep. That's a C1. That's the 8th subdivision. So to get to it, we turn all the way up. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we can do the same for the rest. This is going to be 2. So I'm going to turn up only that one. 1, 2. And for these sub oscillators, we're going to do 4 and 2. That will also give us a giant unison, but not quite as deep as that C1. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we'll do the same thing here. 1, 2. So let's hear all these together. It's a nice unison. And then if we hear all these together, it's cool too. And then all together for a giant C unison. Nice, it's huge. And that leaves us some space to work with our sequencers. Now, in fact, I'm not going to actually program in sequencer 1 at all. This is going to ring out in that giant C unison, and we're going to use the VCO 1 levels to control how many octaves are included in the voice. But every time it's going through, the envelope's still going to make it sound. So we're just going to leave rhythm 1 off and the sequencer 1 off, and we'll focus on VCO 2. I'm going to use sequencer 2 for that, so we're going to turn it on. Our rhythm's going to be at 1, so we're going to turn it all the way clockwise and turn it on to sequence 2. And now let's program in our notes. So what I want for this is we're just going to be running an arpeggio up and down of C minor. So we'll go E flat. Actually, I'm going to turn down everything but VCO2 just so we can get the notes right. So that's going to be E flat. We'll go to our next one. G, a high C, and then a low C, back to even. And when we play it all together, I really like this because it starts on the 3rd. It doesn't quite sit right, but again, this one we're not syncing up anything together, so that makes it especially cool because everything's going to be kind of running on its own time. This is roughly about the tempo I'm going to play it. So you can hear that VCO 1's just ringing out that C unison with the same envelope. With the longer decay time, it almost adds to that drone. Okay, so with no patching together, let's hear what it all sounds like together. Pretty cool stuff. All right, but let's move to the meat of this thing and really make it all tie in together, put in some modulations and things like that. So I'm going to admit right from the get-go that I'm actually going to cheat on this patch. We're going to use a multiple. This is a multiple that I built from AI Synthesis. You can get multiples all kinds of different places. It's a passive mult, so you don't even need to plug it into a rack or anything to use. And I'm just going to keep it loose and we're going to use it like this. If you want to get into building modules, I highly recommend getting a kit from AI Synthesis. And this multiple is a great place to start. It's just basically soldering in these jacks. I have a video where I show myself kind of bumbling through it. It was the first time I had ever built a module, but I built tons since, and it's been a really awesome experience. So I definitely give it a shot. But we're going to use this today. You could also use stacking cables. And then of course, if you don't have anything to multiply with, you could just eliminate those patch points or decide which one you really want to use in your patch. So let's go first what we're going to multiply. And what I really want to use is the LFO of the mother and send it out to a bunch of different places. So the first thing we're going to do is actually use the multiple on the mother to multiply it. So I'm going to go from the LFO triangle into the mult. Now we have 2 outs for the LFO. The first one, I want to have some control over attenuation. So we're also going to use our VC mix. I'm going to plug it into mix 2. So now our mix out, we can tame this LFO and have it not rise or fall as much by lowering this knob. And if we want it full blast, we could turn it all the way up here. And then we can also come out of the multiple 2 to just get a full blast copy of the LFO. So let's send that full blast copy of the LFO up to the FM amount. You remember on the DFAM where I was playing with the FM and it was kind of creating some different textures? Well, that's going to be given the full blast of this slowly moving LFO. Now the LFO that we're going to control with the VC mix knob, that's the one that we're going to use our multiple to multiply it a whole bunch of times and send it out to various locations. So I'm going to come out of VC mix right here and go right into the mult. And where am I going to send this? Well, let's have one. We'll send one of them to the cutoff of the Subharmonicon. We'll send another one to the cutoff of the mother. And then let's send another one to the resonance of the mother. Actually, I'm going to change up the colors just so we can see it better. We'll have the full blast LFO going up to the FM in red. And we'll have the attenuated LFO. You know what? I'll make this all color coordinated. And the multiplied LFO will all be in blue. And we'll send that out to our various sources. So now we have a multiplied, controlled, attenuated LFO going to the cutoff of the mother, to the resonance of the mother, and to the cutoff of the Subharmonicon. And this is going to be moving super slow. This VC mix will give us control as to whether or not it doesn't have any effect at all, or full blast, or anywhere in between. But that's not all. I really want to give this some more texture. I'm going to use the square wave LFO to go up into the VCF mod. Now the square wave LFO is what's going to be controlling the modulation of the cutoff of the DFAM. And we're going to use this knob here to attenuate it. So if we don't want it to have any effect at all, we can turn it way down. If we want it to have a subtle effect, we can turn it up slightly, etc., etc. So there we go. We have all our patch points. Now let's turn things up slowly so you can really hear what's going on. We'll start with the DFAM. I'm going to turn down this VCF mod and we can just listen to the full blast of this FM amount going with this LFO. So you can already hear it kind of adds a little bit of a rhythmic texture to it. Now I had that up a little bit higher than I'm going to set it in the final patch because I just wanted it to really be emphasized. Cool. All right, so let's listen to the other patch point, which is going to be that square wave LFO impacting the cutoff. So we'll turn the cutoff around here somewhere, and let's listen to what that sounds like. And I love the way those two patch points interact together, because the second you hear the cutoff, close back up, you'll start hearing the frequency modulation start go back down. And it's something you also want to pay attention to. You can hear that high-pitched hissing sound. That's because of the resonance. So however high you turn this up, that's how high the cutoff's going to go up. And that's going to change whatever pitch that resonance is giving off. So you want to use this combined with this and the cutoff to control how loud that note is with this knob and what the frequency is with the combination of those two. And you want to find something that kind of harmonizes with the whole mood. All right, since we've heard that, let's listen to what the patch points are doing with the mother. So this one, the only thing that's affecting the sound of the mother is coming out of the multiple, and it's changing the cutoff and the resonance. So you can hear how that affects the sound, but right here, this is going to be how much of an impact it has. Let's listen to it full up and then down a little bit. That's a little bit much. I think for this patch, we want it to be a little bit subtler, so we'll kind of put it somewhere in the middle right there. All right, and then finally, let's head on down to the Subharmonicon and listen to what that does. It's the same control, the VC mix that's being multiplied, that's going into the cutoff of the sub. Oh yeah, that just sounds so awesome. I love the Subharmonicon. Sounds absolutely fantastic. All right, now when we play them all together, you get some really cool effects. So let's turn them up slowly. Let's start with the sub. So that makes for a super amazing patch. I want to play it for you. 1 second. We're going to add in some reverb and some other kind of post-processing effects. I'm going to go kind of minimal because I want to retain the character of the synths and not add in like a shimmer reverb or something like that. But this particular patch, it's really fun to play with the sequence, but it's also super fun just to play notes with the glide function on. It sounds super awesome. I'm going to give you a taste of what that sounds like. If we leave the sequencer off and I turn the decay up, it has a super cool vibe if we turn the glide all the way up. So watch this. That sounds cool, but listen when I go up a few octaves. Now, listen to that when we're playing the whole thing together with the subtle effects and just everything kind of rounded out together. I'm actually going to turn the VCA mode on once it goes there. Once we turn everything on, just so you can really hear it ring out. It sounds awesome. Pretty cool stuff. I have to play around with it and figure out how I'm going to work everything in together. I've put this patch together multiple times to practice sort of putting it up and down together. And there's just so much fun to be had in playing with it. So definitely give it a shot. Play around with the sequence, play around with playing different notes. It's just awesome. So there you have it. That's my patch. This is, I mean, every patch when I make it is automatically my favorite one at the time until I make another one. But right now, this is like my favorite patch that I've done. I can just get really lost in it. There's just so many options just to play with it and make it different things. So I hope you like it. Once again, I'm going to write this up in detail and put it on my Patreon page so that you can reference it and recreate it. And I hope you check it out and decide to join up there and support me. I'd really appreciate it. Make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.